Welcome into another edition of The Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm Mitch Mason, joined by JD Davis of the North Texas Eagle to break down the UNT Mean Green and talk storylines in the American Athletic Conference, one of the most unique group of five conferences this year, and one of the favorites to get that playoff spot that's reserved for the group of five. JD, I'm excited for today. How are you?
Good, man. Fall camp has begun, and we're just a few weeks away from actual kickoff. So it seems like it's been 2 years since the last time they played, but we finally made it through the off season, and we're almost there.
I know my wife is looking forward to fall weather, seasonal elements. I'm really looking forward to the cooler temperatures. I think the next 2 weeks are 100 degrees plus here in North Texas, but I'm really excited for fall football. This off season I think has been one of the longest that I can remember covering football. Mostly because of all the changes, right? The realignments. That's not necessarily unique to this year, but with the addition of the 12-team playoff, it feels like more teams than ever before at least have a pictured chance of making it to a national championship game. And I'm not going to debate who realistically has a shot at or not. I think perception is a lot here in college football. But let's start here. As someone who covers a group of five team, what is your take on the G5 getting a team into the 12-team playoff? Are you a fan? Are you someone that thinks that, hey, the group of five should have their own playoff like we've heard in the past couple of weeks? Where do you fall in that?
I'm excited for the group of five teams to have a chance to get a seat at the table. We've seen the past, from UCF, Tulane a couple years ago, knocking off USC. I think there's always, it seems like every year, one or two group of five teams that has a chance to compete and knock off some Power Five schools. And you've probably played the new EA Sports games. I mean, once you get to the playoffs, really anything can happen. I think there's still going to be that upper echelon of the Michigans, the Georgias, the Alabamas, but you get a team like Tulane a couple years ago or UCF, they get in the playoffs, they win a couple games, who knows what can happen as far as injuries go. So I'm excited. I'm not going to say I'm 100% opposed to, a group of five top playoff scenario, but I am excited with this, the way it is now that, if a team like North Texas could, win the conference in the American Conference, they've got a chance to make it to the playoffs, and who knows what happens from there.
I'm pumped to see the proof of concept this year, and then how we go about continuing to team build in the group of five. I mean, I don't think the parity has been as drastic as folks were initially saying. When the transfer portal was introduced, it really has not turned into just everybody in the world ends up at five schools, and everyone else is kind of picking amongst the leftovers, right? We've seen how this ecosystem has developed, and there's a whole lot of talent playing at the group of five level, which is I think what college football is all about. In the American Conference, you've got some of the biggest contenders for that G5 playoff spot: Memphis, Tulane, UTSA, USF has even been mentioned as a dark horse there. We're going to get to the American and have you talk about some of those big time storylines. But first, we're here in North Texas. You cover the Mean Green as your primary focus. North Texas is a team that's near and dear to my heart. I think they're one of the most fun offenses, obviously, in the country. They're always a team that has a lot of flash and a lot of potential going back to the Mason Fine years. But this year, there's so much overturn happening on that roster and under Eric Morris in his second year. What's the big storyline for North Texas coming into 2024 in your mind?
Yeah, I mentioned the other night on our podcast that I think I'm the most excited for this season that I've been for a North Texas season in quite some time, just because of all the new faces. I think they, somewhere near 70 something new faces this year on the roster. So seeing how all these new faces, you've got, every position group, you've got new faces there. So, and a lot of coming from the Power Five ranks. So I'm excited to see how the puzzle pieces fit together. And I think that's funny because, that's how they when they get a new recruit, they tweet out the puzzle piece. But really, this year it's, Chandler Morris, new transfer quarterback from TCU, Juwan Price, transfer running back from Syracuse. We can go up and down the whole roster, and I'm excited to see. It's we saw some of the guys play in spring ball, but
Mhm.
we haven't got to see the finished product yet. We've seen a little bit early on in fall camp, but as far as we tried to do ceilings and floor the other night, and it's super hard when you're talking about 3/4 of a team is
Yeah.
completely new, and this is their first year in the green.
I can't wait to get into their schedule with you here in just a little bit. But let's kind of go down this roster. Let's start at the quarterback position. North Texas was one of the most prolific offenses a season ago. Passing the ball, they could do it against anybody. It was the defense that really held them back and kept them from being a bowl eligible team. But Chandler Rogers is now at Cal, most likely the backup. We'll see if he can win that job or win some playing time. But in comes Chandler Morris from TCU. He was thought to be the guy in Fort Worth, couldn't stay healthy, but he's got one more year of eligibility. Now he's going to spend that in Denton. What do you like from Chandler Morris? And, you talked about kind of floor and ceiling as far as the team goes. What do you project for a ceiling and a floor from your quarterback room this year?
Yeah, I think North Texas's success this year is 100% dependent on Chandler Morris, and we saw it when he was at TCU. I mean, he put up video game type numbers against Baylor and several other games. The biggest problem was can he stay healthy? And he said the other day after practice he's 100%. But something I've noticed even from talking to him, I mean, we interviewed him right after he committed, is Chandler Morris is like another coach on the field. I mean, he's like having a second offensive coordinator. He's 110% business. And he's, he wasn't here for spring ball, but was able to get here early summer and has really kind of taken over a leadership role really early on, which I think is impressive, but it also shows, the kind of leadership he can bring, which has been impressive. But yeah, I think, this, like I said, this North Texas success this year is 100% dependent on his health. I think if North Texas can get 12 games out of him, I think they've got a very good chance to make some noise in this American Conference.
Mhm. You talk about health, and obviously the best friend to keep quarterback healthy is that offensive line. You've got a couple of starters coming back, Gabe Blair, Jet Duncan. What do you like about that offensive line? Are there any concerns for that group ahead of this season?
I think I would say the biggest concern is just making sure that they can get continuity. I mean, because there's several new guys. I think Gabe Blair is right up there with one of the best offensive linemen in the group of 5 in the country. I think he is, being a Denton guy, he's been a guy that's really easy to cheer for, being a North Texas fan. Jet Duncan, he's not the tallest guy. He's 6'1", but he's a Swiss Army knife. He's played, every position along the offensive line in his time at North Texas. But then there's several new pieces coming in this year, so it's going to be interesting to see how they piece them out. Makai Lee from Missouri, Peterson's coming from Texas Tech, and then Larry Moore, a guy they got last year from Texas Tech. So you're going to have a couple Power 5 transfers across that offensive line, but I don't think they've 100% solidified that starting 5 yet. So that's something I'm kind of watching as camp continues on. I think it's going to be, we should hear, that starting 5 pretty quickly, but I think Duncan and Blair are 2 names that you can definitely, pencil in is going to be starting and kind of being leaders in that offensive line room.
Yeah, we'll see what they get out of the tackle spots. At least, I mean, you could project, like you said, Makai Lee and Larry Moore at the tackles. That's what I've seen in the projections. They're obviously big guys, right? 6'7", 6'6". That interior of the line so critical to running the football. And North Texas has a deep stable of running backs. The issue really has been keeping those guys healthy in the past couple of years, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look back to probably Lance Dunbar, the last running back that really was the leader of the team and kind of stayed healthy from start to finish. I
That's a
mean,
name.
Jeffrey Wilson. I mean, he had a amazing career at North Texas, but it was really hard for him to string a full season together without a couple injuries along the way. And Ayo had an amazing year last year, but he wasn't even the starter. I mean, he was kind of number 3 on the depth charts. Ragsdale got hurt. Oscar kind of got banged up a little bit, and Ayo kind of took over and had a 1,000-yard season. But it's going to be interesting. Like I said, Jawan Price coming from Syracuse, Smith coming from Minnesota, and then you've got Akaka Ragsdale, who was kind of I had penciled in as the starter last year before he got injured. Those 3 guys are kind of, I think, going to be the kind of the 3-headed monster moving forward this season. And everything we've heard so far out of camp, that trio's impressed so far. So, losing a 1,000-yard rusher stinks in the transfer portal era. It's kind of you kind of expect it, but I think that North Texas may have been able to uh, hopefully replace those guys and keep that production going.
Is Ragsdale healthy as camp has started?
Yes, yeah, yeah, he should be good to go. Blair's another guy that we just talked about. He was kind of battling through some injuries, but I think both those guys, game one, they'll both be out there on the field and ready to go.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Blair Conright, who is one of your projected starting wide receivers this year. Talk to me about the weapons. You get Oscar Hammond, who transfers in at the tight end position. Landon Sides went to school with his older brother, so I've watched him grow up and really blossomed last year. Who is Chandler Morris going to have to throw the ball to this year? And is there one guy that you kind of project as the safety blanket?
Yeah, you mentioned Oscar Hammond. I think that's guy's going to be kind of they grabbed several Power Five transfers out of the portal that a lot of fans get excited about. But Oscar Hammond's come from Central Oklahoma. I think that's the guy at the end of the year that we're going to say that was the best transfer they got this season. I mean, he is, he's looked the part so far. I think that, North Texas hadn't had a tight end. They got hit pretty hard in the portal year before last, losing Jake Roberts and Varkey's Gum. So Oscar Hammond, I think, got a chance to really solidify that room that had a lot of question marks last year. But a guy that I'm excited to see take that next step is a guy, Damon Ward. He's been with North Texas for a while now, but has really took a leadership role this past year. Put on some weight. I think he's going to be a lot better fitted to take on that number one receiver role this year. But I think if I had to put money on who's the leading receiver at the end of the year, I think Damon Ward, makes that jump kind of like Jamari Macklin did last year. 2 years ago, Jamari Macklin had 400 yards receiving. He made that jump to go over 1,000 yards last year. I could see Damon Ward making that same jump this season.
Mhm. The offense is always fun to watch. It certainly seems like they've reloaded at some key spots. Health is going to be a big factor. But let's flip the script now and look at the defense. It's really hard to defend anything the defense did last year, right? 130th in total defense. They were the 128th scoring defense last year. It just was not anything really to look back on and be proud of, I think, for a majority of that season. This year, you've got a number of starters that are back. You've got a guy in Reg Tejada who's one of the best cover corners in the group of five, but he's 5'8", right? So doesn't get a lot of the press clippings. Talk to me about where North Texas is hoping to find their identity in a new defense this season.
Yeah, so I mean, Coach Morris, just like all North Texas fans, we're just not pleased with the defensive effort last year. They didn't finish where they wanted to. Still were in close games. Seemed like every game of the year, but the defense just didn't perform like you wanted it to. So I think Coach Morris has been extremely. He's worked pretty much extensively with the defense this spring, and he said the other day after his post-practice presser that the number one goal this year will be stopping the run. That they're going to pretty much sell out to stop the run and kind of force teams to beat them through the air. So that's going to be, and they've brought in several pieces, I think, to help do that. I think that I predicted on our podcast the other night that I think that North Texas has a chance to break, top 100 this year, which, doesn't sound like a lot, but I think when you put the offensive numbers up that North Texas does, if a team like North Texas can make that jump from, 129, 128, whatever they were, to in the top 100, I think it's going to be a big advantage and really help them, solidify a bowl game and potentially a conference championship berth.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it feels like if the Mean Green could stop allowing opponents, 40 plus, which in a
Yep.
number of their losses last year, it's 35, 38, 42, 45. It just felt like there weren't many drives that they got stops on. Let me ask you this: Matt Capone running a 3.35. Is there any desire in Denton for that scheme to have the traditional four-man front, or is it something that you think, give him time? It's only his second year with this system. Give him time to get the bodies in that he needs, install that scheme, and we'll see it improve.
Yeah. So I was always a big fan of the 4-2-5 that Coach Phil Brennett brought in. I thought it was probably the best defense North Texas had in the last several years. But I would say that the other side of that is we've seen what Iowa State's been able to do in the Big 12 the last 2 decades. Iowa State's not getting 4- and 5-star talent up there. and they're still able to have a top 2 or 3 defense every year, year in and a year out of the Big 12. And that's kind of what's gave me hope, and what's kind of like, kept me motivated to see how this thing plays out, is and giving it a little time, because this defense, they went from a 3-man front back to the 4-2-5, back to a 3-man. So, this is the second year finally back in the 3-3-5. So I'm interested to see how year 2 switching back to the 3-man front goes, and just, can hope that we can find, and kind of become, potentially the Iowa State of the American Conference.
Mhm. Well, with a 3-3-5, the rush defense is going to get a lot of the focus, considering North Texas just couldn't stop anybody on the ground. But let's start in the secondary. North Texas has a number of talented names back there, aside from Ridge Tejada. Who else stands out to you in that secondary unit?
Yeah, they went super heavy in the safety room this year, grabbing B.J. Allen from Texas, grabbing Ashim Young from Ole Miss, who actually played with Coach Capone in Iowa State. But I think a guy that, we haven't talked about that much, but I think a guy that's going to be kind of like Oscar Attaway, that's, he wasn't a P5 guy, but Jaden Hill from Ohio Dominion, Division II school. I think at the end of the year, he's going to be, he's got probably one of the best chances to kind of surprise people and end up on an all-conference team. As far as one of the transfers go. But then I'm excited for year 2 of growth from, Javen Anderson and Evan Jackson. Those are 2 true freshmen last year that played a ton of snaps. And, you'd hope that if they make another jump this year, that they could even battle and maybe hold off some of those transfers for starting jobs also.
Yeah. In the front 7, who is going to lead that unit in order to see those improvements? Is it Jordan Brown, who's returning at linebacker? Is it somebody else that you see as the leader of that front?
I think Rod Brown. I mean, I think that's a guy that's kind of been there. He's kind of the corner piece of that defense along the defensive line. Veteran presence, leadership presence, and I think him and Ethan Waslowski is a guy that it seemed like last year as a freshman was all over the ball at all points. Had a little trouble wrapping up on some tackles and stuff, but I would say that Rod Brown would probably be I'm going to pick him as be a leader on that defensive line, and then I'm going to take Ethan that linebacker room. They got several transfers in that linebacker room, but just everything I've seen, he's gotten bigger, stronger this offseason. And I think Ethan's going to take a pretty big jump this season and kind of really jump into a leadership role. And like I said, still got several years of eligibility left.
Mhm. Well, North Texas has an interesting schedule this year. We were talking right before we hit record. You get 3 of the top 4 projected teams in the American this year, right? You get Memphis, Tulane, and UTSA in the rivalry game. You avoid South Florida. Thank goodness for that. But outside of that, you can spend a lot of time picking apart this schedule, finding a floor, finding a ceiling, and ultimately deciding what your projection is. So, let's start with the non-conference at South Alabama, Stephen F. Austin, Texas Tech, and Wyoming. Certainly not an easy non-conference slate for North Texas. South Alabama is not going to be the same that we've seen, at least based off of last year's results. Stephen F. Austin certainly seems like an easy win, but then Texas Tech and Wyoming, those are not gimme games, specifically the Texas Tech game, right? You're going to have to fight, scratch, and claw to even be in that game. So, how would you define success for North Texas through the non-conference slate heading into AAC play?
Yeah, and Coach Morris has been pretty upfront. He said, that if you look at those all 3 FBS opponents, non-conference, they all won their bowl game last year. Now I know South Alabama, new coach Major Applewhite taking over that program. Wyoming, a new head coach. Their Coach Bowles retiring, and then you got Texas Tech, who Coach Morris and the staff. There's a lot of Texas Tech ties. I know that the staff's going to be super pumped up for that game. A lot of guys going home, but I think a North Texas fan, you expect to come out of this 2-2. I think anything less than 2-2, you're going to be pretty disappointed. I do think we saw last year when you make a coaching change. There's some growing pains. So I think that, North Texas is not a favorite at South Alabama right now, but I like our chances. Like I said, I think new coach in his first game, Major Applewhite taking over there. I think that North Texas has a chance to go to Mobile and potentially have a little upset there. And then, like you said, SFA should be a win. So I think you at least have to win those 2. Now I don't think that, I don't like our chances of upsetting Texas Tech, but Wyoming in Denton is going to be an interesting game. I think if you're 2-1 headed in that game, that's going to be probably one of the more popular G5 games that weekend.
I agree. Might have to make the drive up
Yep.
to DACU anyway. No matter what North Texas has done before that. So they head into AAC play September 28th. They host Tulsa, and then you've got kind of an interesting. You've got at FAU, which we'll see what the Owls look like. They've got a lot of returning production. There's a lot of people that if you read Bill Connolly's stuff, his metrics love FAU. My eye test, I don't necessarily feel that about Tom Herman's group, but you go on the road to Boca Raton, and then is the tough sled. You've got at Memphis, Tulane, Army, at UTSA before finishing up with East Carolina in a road trip to Temple. Like I said, 3 of the 4 projected favorites in the American Conference. How can UNT navigate that section, and what's a realistic expectation for the Mean Green as they take on the cream of the crop?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting off with Tulsa at home is going to help out North Texas. You got a chance to get off on the right foot. North Texas beat Tulsa last year in Tulsa. Florida Atlantic, North Texas just has not played good in Boca Raton.
They
It
haven't.
seems like the last 10 years, it just seems like that we just do not play well. As far as that gauntlet in the middle, I'm a lot of people, the Memphis Tulane game, Memphis, I think we'll talk about contenders later. That's the team that I think if I had to put money on the conference championship winner at this point, I think that's the easy money right there. Tulane coming here, new coach. I think they've got John Summerall is a very impressive coach. And I think that they've loaded up on transfer portal talent. So I hope that they're not the same Tulane team as last year. But even when we say that, North Texas was one possession game away from beating them in New Orleans last year. The game that worries me, and not a lot of people probably think about it, but it's like the Army just
Sure.
having to, whatever momentum you've got on defense at that point, you pretty much have to put everything on hold and, have to worry about the triple option. You change all your defensive philosophies, your lineups, everything for that 1 week. And then, 4 days later, 5 days later, you're having to go on a Friday night to UTSA. So those 2 games worry me probably more than the first 2, just because, uh, you know, we've seen where we've beat Army the last few years, but then we've also, there's been games where it looks like we had no clue how to stop the triple option. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how that goes. We played Navy close last year and should have beat Navy, but Army's a much better team. So, yeah, like I said, I think if kind of like in the non-conference slate, if UNT could figure out a way to win 2 games, I think if you're a North Texas fan in that 4-game stretch, I think you celebrate. I think you're on the table celebrating. 1-3, it's not the end of the world. I just don't think you want to go through that stretch 0-4. I think that's going to really make making a bowl game pretty much impossible.
Yeah. So with that, one of the more challenging schedules in the conference, do you have North Texas getting to a bowl game this season?
Yes, yeah, I do think that this defense is going to be improved. I'm hoping with the offensive line upgrades, they keep Chandler Morris upright and healthy, and then I think that 6 to 8 game mark, 6 to 8 wins mark is not out of the realm of possibilities, and I think is definitely a possibility in year 2 of Coach Morris.
I like it. I think 6-6, 7-5. I go back and forth between those. I think on the offensive talent alone, their ability to just put up points. Hopefully, if Chandler Morris can stay healthy, I mean, this is going to
Yep.
be a fun team to watch, right? This is going to be one of those G5 teams. It doesn't matter if you're not from Texas, you're not from the South. You
Yep.
can turn on North Texas, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun watching them. So, I would love to see them get to a bowl game. I would love to see them win a bowl game. That would be incredible as a t-shirt Mean Green fan. But I'm excited about North Texas and what they hopefully can do this season. I want to start as we transition over to the contenders in the American with UTSA, not because they're the favorite, but because the Frank Harris era has ended and they're the biggest rival of North Texas. That game always is fun to watch the fan bases talk back and forth on Twitter as just someone that is a third party to all this. So tell me about that rivalry with UTSA. What do you see from this Roadrunner team that should be much more run heavy this year as opposed to when Frank Harris was leading them? What's your feel on the Roadrunners this season?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. You don't have Harris this year, and you don't have Wisdom, and those are two guys that I've seen a Jeff Traylor interview the other day where I didn't realize those guys have been there with him the whole time. I mean, all 4 years, 5 years he's been there, they've been on the roster. So those are two key pieces. That's the leader on your offense, leader on your defense. Now, I do think that McCowan played well in their bowl game last year. I think that I don't want to say that they're not going to miss a beat just because Harris was just such a good G5 quarterback the last few years and just such a leader to that program. Um, I think what's going to help UTSA, keep this kind of momentum going, and I don't see a huge drop off, is Coach Traylor and the staff. They've just done such a good job recruiting on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, that they've been one of the best G5 programs, finding guys, whether it's Power 5 bounce backs or, in the transfer portal, and even high school recruiting, locating guys that they've just done. As a North Texas fan and a guy that covers it, I've been envious of the way they've been able to find success in recruiting on both sides of the ball. So I think that Harris and Wisdom leadership maybe missed a little bit, but I just don't see a huge drop off. I just think this team's got too much talent and still bringing back too many veterans on this team that I see UTSA kind of still rolling. As long as McCowan can keep going and keep trending up in that quarterback room, I think that UTSA is going to be fine this season.
I think you hit on the biggest part, the lines and just the increase in recruiting that they've seen. I listened to a UTSA preview a couple of weeks ago, and you could just hear the excitement in their voices to talk through the two deep and to talk about where these guys had come from. And Traylor's done a remarkable job with that program. I'm with you. I know some folks are down on UTSA because they've lost Harris, but Jeff Traylor certainly knows how to work the magic, and I think he's been a good enough program builder to where UTSA is going to be right there at the front. They appear on North Texas's schedule. So too do Memphis and Tulane. We talked about them. Memphis, you mentioned earlier, is if you had to put money down on a champ from the AAC, you would go with the Tigers. Seth Hennigan, a local kid from Denton Ryan. It was a lot of fun covering him in high school. He's slinging the ball for the Tigers, and that offense is one of the best in the entire country. Similar to North Texas, though, they're a great half team where that defense has struggled mightily over these last couple of years. Does that defense take a step forward this year in your mind, or is it something that could hold them back and even prevent them from being the AAC champion?
Yeah, I mean, when Memphis came to Denton last year, it was a shootout. It was a last-second pass from Hail Mary from Seth Hennigan that won them the game. I think that the way they've hit the portal, it's kind of like UTSA. They've really solidified several key positions with Power 5 transfers. They even landed Jair Shorter, who used to be a North Texas wide receiver, and I don't even think he's projected to be one of their top 2 or 3 receivers. So they're deep, bringing back a lot of talent. Like I said, also added several guys through the portal. But I think, Seth Hennigan, to me, and I hate seeing it because he's a Denton guy, being in North Texas, seeing a guy like that go to your conference rival and be one of the best quarterbacks in their history. But yeah, he's hard to bet against at this point. Just the amount of games he's got under his belt, the amount of snaps he's taken. That I definitely think that this Memphis team's going to, definitely take a step forward this year and should be, one of those final 2 teams battling for the conference championship.
Mhm. You talked about Tulane a little bit just a few minutes ago, and they're under new leadership with Willie Fritz leaving for Houston. John Summerall comes in, ground and pound offense at Troy. He was very physical, a great tenure in Troy as their head coach. They don't have their quarterback room solidified yet, whether it's going to be Ty Thompson, the transfer from Oregon, or Kai Horton, who's the backup last year, stepped in multiple times when Michael Pratt went down. Do you see Tulane's quarterback situation, or at least the lack of a starter being named so far, as maybe a reason to believe that Tulane takes a step back this year? Are they susceptible to an upset, or is this going to be kind of the same old for Tulane?
Yeah, I think being able to get Summerall from Troy and him being able to bring his guys over and the amount of success Troy's had the last few years, I think it's definitely going to help. I think just being, outside watching in, when Willie Fritz left and it was just kind of awkward on Twitter, you just see staff leaving by the day, players leaving, players opting out of bowls, players hitting the portal. And, Tulane recovered fantastically. I mean, that could have been a really ugly situation, but them able to get John Summerall in there, and that's I just the amount of success and who they were able to bring in the portal. I don't see Tulane being a huge drop off. Now, I don't think that I don't pick them to go undefeated or have the kind of success that Tulane did a few years ago. I think it may take a year or two for them to really bounce back. But I think being able to get a guy like Summerall in there and being able to bring several guys over is going to help that transition a lot quicker than say if they'd have brought in a defensive coordinator or something from somewhere that wasn't able to bring a staff and several transfer portal guys with them.
Well, so last question here as we kind of wrap this up. You've got the main contenders. Is there a surprise in the American that you see this year? A team maybe coming from the bottom, a team that's a championship contender, and finally, do you have a team from the American making the 12-team playoff?
So the first part of that question, I think a team that I've liked just what they've done in the portal, Charlotte. I think they, bringing in a transfer quarterback from Florida, I believe, and the offensive line, they landed several offensive line targets that North Texas was going after. That's kind of the reason I was keeping an eye on their success, that they brought in 4 or 5 guys from the P5 ranks. So I'm interested to see what kind of jump, Biff and them can make in year 2. They've got several talented defensive transfers as well. So if they can get the pieces in place and get that team, I think they've got some talent there now to work with. So that's probably my team that I could say could make probably the biggest jump that nobody's talking about. I think they won maybe 3 or 4 games last year.
Yeah, 3-9.
And I think if Memphis runs the table or, even comes out of this year, 10-2, 11-1, and can win the American Conference, I mean, I think that it's going to be really hard to keep them out just because of Memphis's, brand and the success they've had in the, the past 10 years since Justin Fuente was there. I think that, and especially seeing, I think it was Liberty, or I don't remember which team was last year that kind of went and laid an egg. I think that the American Conference is going to have a kind of a leg up this year just because we saw SMU, they went and won their bowl. And then I believe it was Liberty that went and got destroyed.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, right now, if I had to pick, I'm thinking, you've got the American Conference champion, probably Liberty and Boise are your 3 schools you're going to pick from. So I think that, like I said, if Memphis can come out of this with maybe 1 loss, 2 at the most, I think that it's going to be hard not to pick them.
With just curious, with Liberty's strength of schedule, toughest team on their schedule is Appalachian State, and then it's a Conference USA slate, right? If Liberty runs the schedule or runs their table, they go 12-0 with a win over App State. You get an 11-1, let's say, American team. How would you compare those strength of schedules if you were on the committee?
I know you're not supposed to think about last year, but that's always going to be in the back of my mind. And I know they played a really good team last year in the bowl game, but still, I just think that it's going to be really hard to get that image out of people's minds. And I hate that because they've got I think they got a great coach, great quarterback, and had a horrible matchup last year. But I still think that's, they can say what they want to, but I feel like that's when they go to set that playoff, I think it's going to be really hard to kind of forget about that and keep that not in the conversation. And I think that the American Conference team in that scenario probably gets the bid.
I like it. I would love to see the playoff, at least a playoff contender, come out of the American. It's a great conference. There's a great conference slate. I'm so excited to watch it. And I'm excited to watch the Mean Green as well. JD, appreciate you coming on to preview all things North Texas and the American. Let the listeners know where they can find you for more.
Perfect. Yeah. North Texas Eagle on Twitter. And we've got a Patreon now. You can subscribe. We've got breaking news. We've got, we usually got boots on the ground at every practice, press conference. So yeah, give us a like, follow, and come check us out.
Perfect. Well, JD, I appreciate it so much. I'm excited to talk more North Texas and American football with you as we go throughout this season. I'm excited for the ride, man. 12-team playoff. It's a new era for college football, and I can't wait to kick it off here in just a couple of weeks. For you guys at home, we appreciate you listening. You heard JD. Go give him a like, a follow. And if you are new to this channel, if you're finding us through the American preview or the North Texas preview, we'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe on our channels as well at 3Tech Pod. is where you can find us. Well, we appreciate you hanging out with us. And until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious, how about